Okay. Yeah.
Morning, everyone. The holiday of Shavuot. We'll celebrate God willing in a few days. One of the facets of the holiday, customs that exist, is the reading of the Megillah of Ruth. And there is a strong connection that all of the Meforshim comment upon between certain basic lessons that the Megillah teaches us and the ideas of Matan Torah, the granting of the Torah, which occurs on Shavuot. I want to discuss this morning with you three facets of this idea. There are many more, but these three, I think, are very germane to us, very relative to us. The Gemara says that the Torah can be described, so to speak, as a book of chesed, goodness, of kindness, concern for others. Tchiloso chesed, v'sofo chesed. Beginning of the book is chesed, because it describes that Rabboni Shalom Malbish Arumin, he gave clothing to those that were naked, to Adam and Chava in Gan Eden. So the first act, so to speak, in the Torah is one of chesed. The Sofo chesed, in the end of the book, is chesed, the last incident when the Torah describes for us that God, so to speak, arranges the burial for Moshe Rabbeinu. Ayikbor Oso Bagai. Shalom buried. So that's the true chesed. We call that chesed shalemet. So tchiloso chesed, v'sofo chesed. There are bookends to the Torah. There's a great deal in the middle. But the book ends, the preface and the afterword is the midah of chesed. Therefore, it is no accident or random event that Avraham Avinu is the founder of the Jewish people, because that's chesed. Chesed with Avraham. And the Gemara points out at the end, Moshe Mashiach, Olam Chesed Yiboneh. The attainment of it will also only be through Chesed. So again, you have Tchiloso Chesed, V'sofo Chesed. Now, if we look in the Megillah of Ruth, we see these issues, I mean, they jump out at us. Was a time when the Shoftim were the judges of Israel. So we're talking about a very chaotic time for a change. Or Darshan Shvot HaShoftim, the Shoftu es Shofteim. The people judge the judges instead of the other way around. And in the Tanakh, we find many times it says, Isha Yosho Ve'enav Yaseh. Everybody is doing their own thing. There is no sense of unity. There is no sense of concern for the general picture. Only interested in the narrow picture. So sometimes the Lord sends us reminders. We're experiencing such a reminder currently. 2 weeks ago, we were all worried about who's going to be the minister of this and the minister of that. And we're all involved in this political turmoil, which is really Shvot HaShoftim, when you're judging everybody else. Then something happens. And when it happens, all of a sudden those issues fade into the background. They no longer are deemed to be of immediate major concern. We're dealing with other issues which seem to be much more important and involve the entire people and not just individuals. So by Hebrew words, there's a famine. The trouble comes on the land of Israel. And there are different reactions to that trouble. And the family here of Elimelech, their reaction is to try and escape the trouble. And they do so by leaving the community, leaving the land of Israel. Now they did not have evil intentions. But the fact of the matter is, Rashi points out, that they left because they didn't want to be burdened with the whole package, so to speak, of the troubles that the people were undergoing in the land of Israel. They were people of wealth and substance. They felt they would be called upon in an unfair way. And so therefore they left. And they went to the neighboring country of Moab. And there they await, so to speak, that the trouble will abate, and they hope to go back. But again, things interfere. Life goes on. Elimelech dies. 2 sons intermarry. Nobody's going back. Now it's interesting that they go to Moab. Moab is descended from Lot. That's where the name comes from. We read about it in the Chumash. Came from the incestuous relationship between Lot and one of his daughters. But the saving grace of Lot, the positive grace, was chesed. A midah, a trait that he had learned in the house of his uncle Avraham Avinu. So even though he's in stone, and even though he is completely removed from Avraham Avinu, And even though he may say, I don't have anything to do with it. He cannot silence the inner voice of chesed that is within him. So when the angels come to Sodom, at a great risk, personal danger, he hosts them, he extends chesed to them. Because of that chesed, so if we look at what I ask you, if you look at the whole picture, which is often hard to do, but here's a person that's 95% wrong. Disloyal. He's morally corrupt. He's a judge in stone. So that we would say, according to our standards, you know, he's gone, forget it. But the Rebbeinu Shalom apparently doesn't view human beings that way. 5% good that's in him is going to save him. Not only save him, he becomes the progenitor of King David. Where it says, Matzasi David Bizdom. That's where I found David HaMelech in Bizdom by Lot. But it's one act of kindness. I don't know how it works. But I do know that somehow there are different standards than we have. Therefore, even the most evil of people, they sometimes do an act that is redemptive of it. That because of that, somehow good can come from that. I have been listening, I just finished an audiobook of the Great Terror in the 1930s in the Soviet Union that killed, the estimates now are 8 to 10 million people. Stalin's Great Terror. One of the chief lieutenants of that terror who survived, but the guys that did the work never survived. It's fascinating that everybody that headed it got killed later by somebody else, by the next guy. But one of them was a Jew by the name of Lazar Kaganovich. Kaganovich is an old Bolshevik who lived well into his 80s, died a natural death. He was a great murderer. He was one of Stalin's most brutal henchmen. And he was responsible for many, many terrible things. So whenever I thought of Kaganovich, I thought of him in a most shameful way. That a Jew should behave like that. He's such an evil person. I was a row in Miami Beach. Late 1960s. So there were many, many great Rabbonim that came to spend the winter in Miami Beach. one of the fine Rabbonim, great men, was a Swedish Rav from Toronto. They have a Greenwald, the relative to the Salem Rebbe, big Talmud Chacham, wonderful person. Very ill, he always had a bad heart. He had undergone all the tortures of first the Germans and then the Russians. We came to Miami Beach, we got to know each other. After a while, we had a learning session every morning together. Learned a great deal from him. Not only about the subject matters that we were learning, but in general, about life and about Torah. One day he told me, he said, I want to tell you how I escaped, how I got out. Because there's a great lesson here. He tells me the following story. That in the war, was caught up in the net that the Soviets had all sorts of people. Since he was a rabbi, etc., he was sent to the Gulag. Said in his camp, the average life expectancy was 6 to 8 months. Hard labor, terrible conditions, minimum rations. Human beings were sent there, they never got out. The warder of the camp was a Jew. Came to him and he told him, he said, I know that you were here for nothing. You didn't do anything. Just got caught up, tucked up in the vacuum cleaner of Stalin. And therefore, I think, says to him, you write a letter to Kaganovich, and I'll get it to Kaganovich for you. Tell him about your situation, maybe he'll let you out. Now, there was a death penalty for writing such a letter, and a death penalty for communicating such a letter outside. And since the camp was full of informers and stool pigeons and all sorts of people, so he said, I originally had, I thought that it was simply a trap. He's going to, I'll write the letter, he'll inform. It'll go on his record that he informed on me, and he'll get an extra piece of bread or something, and I'll get shot. I didn't do anything. A week later, he came back to me again. And he said, I thought I told you what to do here. I'm willing to help you. He said, I thought to myself, I'm not going to make it here anyway. Maybe he's sincere. Maybe this is a long shot. I'll write the letter. And he wrote the letter to Kaganovich, in which he said, You know, he never did anything. He doesn't want to do anything, and he's not anti-Soviet. Not the whole thing you can imagine. He knew Russian perfectly, and he gave the letter to the warder surreptitiously, and nothing happened for about 3 weeks. He's getting weaker and weaker all the time. Finally, one day, they call all of the prisoners out for roll call. There's an officer from the NKVD or police, and they call out his name, Greenwald, step forward. He figures they're going to shoot him in front of everybody because that's what they do. Because of the letter. So he stepped forward. And the man said, we have an order here from Comrade Kaganovich to release you. But he said, I cannot release you unless you tell me how did you get the letter to Kaganovich? Who helped you? Tell me that, you can go in 10 minutes, we'll take you out of here. Said he was not unwilling to implicate the warden. Said, I don't know. Said, I admit I wrote a letter. I don't know how it got there. And they did this like 2-3 days in a row. He didn't budge. Finally, they took him and they put him on a train. The train crossed the border between Russia and Romania. Originally, he was a Romanian. And when they crossed the border, the train slowed down to about 5 miles an hour. And they threw him out of the train while it was still moving. Broken arm, etc. And from there, somehow he eventually came to America. Ceausescu allowed a lot of the Jews to leave, and he became a Rav in Toronto, etc. So he said to me, he said, Kaganovich has a schus. Look at that. In one act of chesed, in 1 million acts of murder, in one act of chesed, he said he has a schus somehow. Because I have a family, he has grandchildren, he has a yeshiva now, he has this and that, you know. He said that's all on Kaganovich's credit. Absolutely remarkable. So that's Lot. Lot has credit somehow. So the Megillah teaches us that we cannot figure out how things work. We don't know the picture. We're missing the pieces of the puzzle. And we judge it by our judgments, but that's not necessarily how heaven judges. So when you look at Elimelech and Naomi, so we have a negative feeling. They're traitors. They're Yordan. They ran away. And they ran away to Moab, to the house of Lot. And out of them come the Yeshua for Klal Yisrael, for the world. David HaMelech, Gilin, Melech HaMashiach, to all of the grandeur that we expect here. So that's Tchiloso Chesed V'Sofo Chesed. In the middle, there's a big book. The beginning of the book is Chesed, the end of the book is Chesed. The end of the book is the Chesed that Naomi and Boaz do with Ruth. The ultimate Chesed of dealing with a stranger, convert, lonely person, at great risk to themselves. Sometimes there's a risk of life. Sometimes there's a risk only of reputation, what others will think of. You can imagine what they said in the Shtibel about Boaz. Also chesed and so forth. So then that's the way to look at Torah. Way to look at how we can deal with others, so to speak. Second comparison, the basic lesson here, one that's very hard for us to digest. That is that the Lord uses people, so to speak, in ways that we don't understand and people that we don't necessarily approve of. The perfect world, you know, then imagine you would say that, the state of Israel should have been founded by the Chazon Ish, or how many good things come from, so to speak, people who are not that good? How does God choose to do it this way and not another way? So again, we are left with that question. But the Megillah teaches us that that is somehow how it works. Somehow the Lord, it's not that you don't understand my ways, it's that my ways are not your ways. So there's no way that you can understand. And therefore, to say that out of Ruth, who was a princess of Moab, to be the mother of monarchy in the Jewish world, sounds like a stretch. But again, why we read the Megillah, in order that we should not have prejudgments as to how things should happen, who should be the actors in the drama to make it happen. And finally, the tenacity of Naomi represents the tenacity of the Jewish people, which is Torah. When Jewish people said Na'aseh v'nishma, they said Na'aseh, we're going to do it anyway. First time they didn't even say v'nishma, they only said Na'aseh. Oh, Hashem diber Hashem Na'aseh. We're going to do it. The world will mock us. We'll say that we don't understand. We won't be able to explain it rationally. Na'aseh, we're going to do it anyway. That's our nature. That's who we are. Built into the DNA of the Jewish. Therefore, at the end, when Ruth gives birth, so they say, the Shchenos say, the neighboring women said, Yulad ben Naomi. Naomi had the baby. Naomi had the baby. Ruth had the baby. The child is Naomi's because it's her tenacity that brought it about. It's because even in the face of really unspeakable tragedies, her life is one sad tragedy, loss of her husband and her children, of status, of her wealth, having to rely on bits of grain that are picked up from the gleaners. It's a woman that was an aristocrat, had wealth and power and status. The Megillah says that the people said, Azos Naomi, look what happened to Naomi. She says, Al tikrenu li Naomi, don't call me Naomi, krenu li Mora. Bitter, it's tough. But the end is Yulad ben Naomi. Naomi's the one that had the child. Because of Naomi, that the whole kingdom of the Jewish people is built, the whole future is open. That tenacity of purpose, of not wavering in the face of unspeakable problems, that is also part of Matan Torah. That's the nasa. I'm going to do it. Actually, you want to be Zochet and Nishma also. Study of Torah, the understanding of Torah, great concepts of Torah. Nasa precedes Nishma. Or it says that's something that the nations of the world didn't understand about the Jewish. They were hasty people. They said yes, and they don't know what they're saying yes to. We're going to do it, do what? It's not a criticism of the Jewish people. In fact, that's the compliment to the Jewish people. People that's able to say, say we're going to do what God says, then we'll try and figure everything out. Try to figure everything out beforehand, we'll never get to do it. Never be able to achieve what we should. So we have here a few ideas of the relationship between the Megillah of Rus and between Matan Torah. Therefore, custom of reading the Megillah of Rus, Shavuos, comes from many, many different sources. There's many facets to it. But this is certainly one of them. I think that all of us can benefit by having this in mind. I want to wish you all Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, quiet and peaceful for all of us.
Amen. Hey,